Hello, muy buenos días. Good morning. My name again is Dr. Rosasati. I'm the Director for Post-Secondary Initiatives with San Antonio ISD. It is a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for joining us today for this session. We hope it's worth your time and we'll do our best to make it worth your time. With me, I actually have some very wonderful people that are going to help me present today's topic. These are folks from actually different places of higher education, and we some of our staff here for SAISD. We all of us in some way deal closely or a little bit marginally with the test itself, with the TSI, and so I'm actually very happy to have this group of folks take time out of their day because we live and breathe TSI. We think about it a lot, and we would like to give you some information so that you can also start to breathe and think TSI, just because of the impact it has on ensuring students have plenty of opportunities after they leave our buildings in high school. So they'll speak to you briefly for some of the slides later on, and we'll have a chance to be able to answer some questions. And if you have questions directly for somebody in the group, feel free to tell us that. Or if you just want to pose an open-ended question, we'll figure out who gets to respond to you. So again, thank you for joining us. Today, the topic that we are wanting to talk to you about again is TSI. And so we'll talk about what it is. We'll talk about its impact on dual credit, the format of the test, and the way that it's scored. And then we'll actually tell you a little bit about a change that is coming to the TSI in January 2021, which is when the test is actually going to change. It'll significantly change. So we'll tell you a little bit about that. If you're a parent who has a 12th grader, more than likely your student is taking the TSI now. If you're a parent who has a 9th through 11th grader, it may be that they're waiting until the spring or they may be testing now. Just depends on the high school and what their goals and intents are. So your student, if they're in 9th through 11th grade, are maybe more likely to take the new test, which is why it's important for us to give you that information as well. And then we'll just go through some very basic practices of how you as a parent can help your student prepare for the test. You don't have to be an educator, but there are some things that you could do today to ensure that your students do practice more for the test. So, what is the TSI? It is basically a college readiness test. And the thing that we always want to start with is why the TSI, why it's important in general. We'll walk you through what it is throughout this presentation, but I want to make sure that we first address as a panel here why we think it's important. And it's mainly the reason we wanted to bring you the voices of colleagues in higher education, in college, in both community college and four-year universities, so that you could hear from them what they see when they think TSI. So group, whoever wants to start, if you could give us your brief version of why you think the TSI is important from your world, how you see it from your side of the house. Anybody can start.
I can start first. So the TSI is important to Alamo colleges because we use this as our college entrance exam, and it helps us place students and level them in the courses that they're going to be in.
And I can piggyback off of Alma. The TSI test is important to UTSA for the same reasons. It determines a student's readiness for different levels of coursework at the university. And in my role in dual credit, it also determines which students are eligible for certain dual credit courses to the UTSA. So we use it to determine a lot of different factors when a student enters the university.
I wanted to kind of add to what Jillian was saying in reference from the district perspective. We think TSI is important for dual credit, so those students that are currently enrolled in high school, but that would also enroll in a college course. And it's also important for those students that may be in grades 9 through 11 to kind of see or gauge where those students are and what things we need to work on for them to be prepared for college level coursework or to be successful on the TSI by the time that they are graduating seniors.
I think for myself that TSI is really one of the best indicators for students to be successful in college. It's a very good measure for equaling 12th grade or beyond. And I really think that That's the idea. It's a wonderful opportunity. You can retest at any time, and it really allows students the opportunity to be more successful. And the measure really does, when you look at the data and you review it, those students who reach those benchmarks are very successful in college level courses.
Yes, and Texas A&M San Antonio, same thing. We use this test for college readiness to determine the pathway that we're going to put the student on to help them be more successful going into college level courses.
Thank you. So as you can see, parents, the pattern is that the test is really a benchmark. It's sort of an indicator of the level of preparation or readiness. We use that word a lot here. The level of preparation that students may have for how successful or how likely they are to enroll in advanced courses in high school, enrolled in college, and then persist and actually obtain a credential from higher education, whether that's a bachelor's, a certificate, an associate's degree, really just to get that second piece of paper. Being able to do better in this test leads to more of those outcomes for kiddos. So it determines readiness, it determines enrollment on college level courses, and I think my colleagues would agree when students take the TSI for community college or even 4 years, you avoid taking classes that are called remedial, which are classes you have to take if you don't pass the test, and classes you have to pay for in college if you don't pass the test. And that's both time and money that people can save just by taking the test now and doing well on it. And that's at least a few classes you don't have to take when you are in college to do so. So that is the why, and that is why we think it's important for you as a parent to know that. Anything the group would like to add before we move on? Okay. All right. So we'll first start with dual credit and kind of explain to you what that looks like. A lot of you parents in the room may already be familiar with what this is, but to explain a little bit of that to us, I have my colleague Ashlyn.
Thank you, Dr. Cesati. So dual credit and how does TSI relate to dual credit? The first thing that I think we all need to understand is exactly what is dual credit. And it is exactly what the words say. A student can be in high school and they can receive credit from the high school itself. And if they are in a dual credit program, they can receive college credit from the college. So essentially, a student is a high school student, grades 9 through 12, as well as a college student at the same time. Now, with traditional dual credit, the TSI plays a very important role when it comes to taking traditional courses, like maybe a first year English course for dual credit. So, a student will need to be TSI ready, meaning they must be college ready in order to take some traditional courses. However, for a CTE dual credit, meaning a career and tech course, maybe your student is interested in cooking and they want to try a culinary arts program. Well, culinary is a career and tech class. And so for that, the student does have to take a TSI exam. However, they may not yet be TSI ready. Maybe they haven't passed it, but they have taken the exam, so they can still continue with a CTE or career in tech course, even though they may not be 100% TSI compliant or college ready. In terms of a PTEC dual credit course, the same can apply. So PTEC stands for Pathways in Technology, Early College High School. So this student is in a early college program on a pathway to pursue an associate's degree or a level 1 certification. So in this PTEC dual credit program, those students will eventually need to be TSI compliant or college ready. But initially, as a freshman, they may begin their dual credit with a career in tech course. And so the goal here is as a ninth grade enters into a dual credit program, they have from ninth grade moving up each grade level to become TSI compliant. So beginning with that ninth grade first dual credit course, if they are not TSI compliant, that does not mean that they can't take a college class. It just means that they need to prepare for that class. So in taking that test, they begin to see, oh, we need to do some type of strengthening in reading. Maybe their math score needs to be strengthened. So taking the TSI test gives us a benchmark of where we need to support the student while still in high school so that by 12th grade, we send them off, they are 100% ready for those college courses. One of the major goals of dual credit is to ensure exposure to our students. What we do know about students that take dual credit is that they are 3 times more likely to enroll in college and 2 times more likely to earn a higher education degree. So when it comes to TSI, when it comes to dual credit, these two play a role together. But I want to make sure I say that it doesn't mean that your student can't take a college class. It just means that they need support, they need assistance to help them become TSI compliant and college ready. And so that is traditional dual credit, career and tech dual credit, and P-Tech dual credit in reference to the TSI exam. Are there any questions?
I think there is a question in the chat from Lucia. She asked what kind of courses can maybe be eliminated at college. So Ms. Lucia, if you like, you can unmute yourself if you want to share a little bit more.
Yeah, I think I just understand a little bit, like English could be one of them. Yeah, I think I understand a little bit more, but if you can add something else.
Yes, Miss Lucia, that was a great question. So what I think you're asking is what courses can they take in high school that they won't have to take in college? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay, so English could be one of those courses. So
Okay.
most freshmen have to take the core classes for college.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those classes can be taken in high school, like English, I'll say 1301. That is a pretty core course for most colleges and universities. And staff from colleges and universities, please jump in and support this answer or help me with this answer. But if that student takes the English 1301 in high school and successfully completes that course with a C or better, that is on their transcript. So then that means when they get actually to the university, they don't need to take English 1. Now there's some good things about that. If your student is an SAISD student, which I'm sure they probably are, your student doesn't have to pay for that course in high school. So there's another benefit to the dual credit. The thing about that student taking that English for dual credit is they must be TSI ready for English. So that means they have to meet the TSI score.
Mm-hmm.
Can I answer your question, Ms. Lucia?
Yes. Can I ask one more?
Yes, ma'am.
The TSI is mandatory in high school or not? Students can choose if they will take or not.
No, ma'am. What we like to do is test all students. So we to give the students the option. We never want to close the door to opportunities for students.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of times 9th through 12th grade, they're young, they may not be sure what they want to do. So we definitely don't want to eliminate an opportunity for students to go to college. So in SAISD, we test all of our students for TSI because that student might graduate and then poof, they decide at 19, I really do want to go to college. And the good part about it is these TSI scores are good for 5 years. So senior decide they took the TSI, they were successful on TSI, your student turns 19, decides they want to go to college, or maybe even 20, decides they want to go to college. They took the TSI 2 years ago, but those scores are still good, and that student can use those scores to help them in college.
Okay. How many times students are tested? Sorry for all my questions.
No worries. You said how many times should a student take TSI?
Yes.
So what we like to do within SAISD, we have a student take the exam. And then we have the counselor or teacher review those exam scores with the student. If a
Mhm.
student was not successful, we are encouraging our campuses to find interventions that will help that student be successful on the TSI before they take it again. Because what we don't want to see is just a student taking the TSI over and over and over again with no success. One, that diminishes their confidence. They may not feel good about the test, and we want them to feel good about their success. And then we haven't helped them get any better. So before a student just continuously takes the test, we want to help them and get intervention and support and some tutoring, and then they take it again. And what we've seen is that each time they get a little bit better. Maybe they pass it the second time, but maybe the score goes up, and we continue with that intervention until they are successful.
Mhm.
And I want to jump onto that question too, because we're speaking a lot about dual credit, but the TSI also grants a student opportunity to save time and money by avoiding developmental courses once they enter college. So even if a student isn't planning on participating in dual credit, they also have to think about once they enter the university, there are several paths they can be put on. You can be admitted to UTSA, right, without being accepted into a degree pathway specifically. And that could be for a variety of reasons. One of the most common reasons is the student is not TSI compliant in either math, reading, or writing. And if that's the case, if the student wants to start courses at UTSA, we may place them in a developmental course, which essentially gives a student the opportunity to learn those skills that they need to become TSI compliant and college ready, but it doesn't give them degree applicable credits towards their major degree plan. So, in essence, they're paying for a course that is not going to count towards their degree. It's getting them ready to take the classes that count towards their degree. So, if a student can avoid developmental classes, that is a best case scenario, right? Because it's going to save them time and money and shorten their time to graduation considerably. So, TSI really is the gateway to deciding whether or not a student will be placed in developmental courses or not.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
questions, Dr. Sassiri. Back to you, sir.
Thank you, Ashley. And thank you for your questions, Lucia. Feel free to continue to interrupt us if anything else comes up. This is why we do this. So don't be shy. I think one of the things that we'll go into next is to really get into a little bit of the weeds of the test itself to help you parents understand. You heard words like college ready, college compliant, or TSI compliant. What is really that? Like, how is that defined? Is what we'll try to get into next. Before we get into the scoring piece, I do have my colleague Jillian who's going to talk to us a little bit about the format of the test. This is just straight up what is really in the test and how does it work for kiddos. So Jillian, take it away.
Yeah, sure. So there's some general basic information about the test we can share. Number one, the test is computer based, right? The student will take it on the computer. And that itself can pose some anxiety or challenges for students that may not be familiar with or comfortable with that test taking strategy. So that's something to take in account when you're preparing a student for the test. The student will take the test at their campus, and it is free for high school students. So the district will pay those fees for the student to take that test. The student can alternatively take the TSI at a college campus, but that will usually be at the cost for the student. So they'll have to pay a fee. For example, if they took it with UTSA or possibly Alamo or San Antonio, TAMU, they will have to pay a fee to take that exam. There are no time limits for the TSI. The student can work at their own pace. And there are three primary subject areas of the TSI assessment: math, reading, and writing. Okay. And they're split up either multiple choice questions or an essay. So the math portion covers the general concepts taught usually in Algebra 1 and 2, intermediate algebra, geometry, data analysis, statistics, and probability. There are only 20 multiple choice questions on that section of the exam. They will take a reading portion, which will measure their strengths in literary analysis, extrapolating main ideas and supporting details, making inferences from texts, and of course, navigating the author's use of language. And there are 24 multiple choice questions in that portion of the exam. The last portion is the writing portion. It has 20 multiple choice questions plus an essay, right? So the multiple choice questions will basically test the students' understanding of grammar, sentence structure, subject verb agreement, logic, and then the essay will really test their ability to create cohesive ideas and revise their essays so it is clean and concise and accomplishes all the goals of the essay that the prompt asks. And that's the general basic outline of the exam. The format's changing a little bit with the new version, and we can get into that a little bit later. But that's just the basic ABCs of how the test is formatted and presented to the student. So if anyone has any questions about that, feel free to type it into the chat box or just raise your hands and we can answer those questions if you have them.
And we'll get a little bit into this right now, but would you kind of give us a preview of the idea of the adaptiveness of the test? That the whole, because it's computer, it gives kids a question in the middle and then it goes up and down a little bit.
Yeah, so the test is reactionary. When the student is taking the exam, just like Dr. Sasati mentioned, there may be some pathway building for the student. They may ask a couple questions on the same type of subject or area based on how the student's performing. And when we get into scoring, it'll also share how reactionary the test is in determining the areas of growth the student has. Right. So if the student passes the exam, they'll get their score and it will measure on 3 basic areas their proficiency depending on the subject of the question. And if the student is below compliant, it will also show you areas of growth where the student really needs to focus in on X, Y, and Z in the reading areas and X, Y, and Z in the math areas. So that's very helpful in intervention and remediation for the student when they retake the exam because they know exactly what they need to study.
Yeah, and feel free to jump on this, Ashley. But to answer the basic dynamic of your question, Lucia, is when one of the district's practices and policies is that students need to have some kind of preparation in between the time they test and the next time they test. And so a student can't because they could sit for the test 5 times a day if they wanted to. But what we say is they test, they get a score. We look at the scores to then create some interventions at the school. That could be through practice questions in the classroom. It could be through some afternoon test prep or some Saturday kind of practice. It could be through tutoring the students among each other or with an English teacher or a math teacher, since those are the topics that are tested here. And then once there's a reasonable expectation of preparation, then the students can retest. And so it does look a little bit different at each high school depending on what the resources are. But the idea is we're not going to let students just test until they get it right. Is we'll test, then we'll get the preparation right, and then they'll retest again. Does that answer your question? Okay, great. All right. So we keep using again words like compliant and readiness. What does that actually mean in the test itself? And so this is just a basic overview of the scoring, and we'll let who is up for this slide? Do we remember? I think I got my initials wrong.
That's me, Alma.
Great. Yes, go for it, Alma. Thank you.
Okay, so just remember that these are the scores we are currently using. And first of all, just remember also that the TSI is a placement test and it's used for leveling students into courses. It's not a pass or fail. So the highest score that a student can get in this is a 390 for math, and the lowest they can get is a 310. So a student is college ready with a score of 350 to 390. When every student starts the exam, they're given a basic 20 multiple choice questions. If the student scores at college level between 350 and 390, then the test is over. And then they go on to the next test, whether it's reading or English. So if a student tests between 336 and 349, they're not college ready at this point. So they're given an additional 48 questions through developmental diagnostic test. And based on how a student does on that diagnostic score, that will determine where we place a student. So for Alamo colleges, we actually do place students in college level with a co-rec course. So they could actually take, for example, a Math 1314 with a co-rec attached to it. And then let's say if a student tests between 310 and 335, then this student is also given a diagnostic test with an additional 30 questions, but that's it's an ABE test, which that score will determine the student's placement. And the ABE score could be anywhere between 3 and 4, that puts them in one level, or it's a 5 or 6. And a lot of this placement is dependent on the student's major. So for example, if your student's gonna major in nursing, that requires a particular math. If your student's gonna be in STEM, that requires a different math. So let's say your student is gonna be an arts major, then they would probably take the liberal arts math. So it all depends on majors, and it all depends on if they're on where they score in order where they're placed in their courses. So are there any questions in regards to scores and where a student's placement would land?
And as parents, as you think about a question, I think one of the other emphasis here that Alma presented well is the students themselves they take this other test called the diagnostic test, and there's 2 levels. But I think the more important piece is that test gives educators and yourself the answers for which areas the student has gaps in their knowledge. And so instead of preparing for the entire TSI again, there's a level of, well, maybe you just need to prepare for how to you review how to do exponents in math. Like that's the thing you really need to focus on. And it's something that we're actually using as a district to really do that, very targeted, specific. You just need a review on this particular piece of math. But that's something that as parents, you can also point to and say, this report is telling me that you're missing these things. I may not know how to help you with that, but at least you and I know what we need to go to the school for and say, I really need help with these things right here. And so we'll show you what the new one looks like. But the point that Jillian was making before, would you expand on this a little bit, Alma, about the adaptiveness? When the student takes that like in this example that we have up here, how we've talked about how when students do well at the beginning, they're more likely to end up in the green part of this. Would you tell us a little bit about that if you have that?
So you're saying if a student scores at college level, is that what?
No, I think what I really want parents to understand is because it's an adaptive test, the test is basically scoring itself as the kids are taking it. And if you usually get a middle of the road in difficulty question, if you get that one right, you get a one that's a little bit harder. And
Okay.
so it vacillates this way, right? And
Okay.
so,
So the test is progressive. So it's based on how the student answers the question. So let's say, like I said, you're given the first 20, and if you're a little deficient, then based on where you scored, then you're either given the diagnostic test or you're given the AB test. But every test that you're given, it's progressive. So based on how you answered, then you're given the next one. And then that one gets a little harder, and then you're given the next one. And just based on where, so you can land anywhere from 310 to 349 and take various courses that are offered based on the student score. So it just depends on the AB score. It depends on or the diagnostic test. So it just depends on where the student lands and where they're going to be leveled into a course. But even if your student does get between 310 and 349, there are courses that are offered that are college level that have, like I said, based on your AB score or your diagnostic test, that you could still take a college level course with a co-rec attached.
Blanca, I noticed you unmuted. Anything you want to add to it?
No, I did want to say that I think one of the things about the diagnostic is that most students are not really happy to see additional questions, but it is a second opportunity. It's a second opportunity to actually improve your score. And that's actually what it's gauging. It's looking for a grade level. You answer a question correctly, it gives you a question that's more difficult. You answer that one correctly, you get another question that's more difficult. So it's constantly gauging where you're at, because at the end, I have a lot of students who come in and ask, what was the purpose of that? Or they just click through it. And when we explain to them during post assessment what was going on, they, oh my, I wish I would have known. Sometimes they're tired, they see 48 more questions. But I think the thing that we want to stress to parents is really that when you get those additional questions, it's an opportunity for us as educators to be able to see how we can assist the student to become college ready. So to take all of those questions seriously, because it does actually, the new exam is much better, way improved, right? Because it will actually give a student an opportunity to become college ready. But it gives us a lot of information, and you're exactly right. If you already know intermediate algebra, we don't want to cover those components with the student. We want to know that, oh, you had difficulty in data and stats, or you had difficulty in probabilities. So that diagnostic test actually gives you an opportunity to review with the student where their deficiencies are, so we can only address that and strengthen their skills in that particular area. So although students from a testing perspective may not always be happy about taking additional questions, it is a very good measure, and for us, a way to write, so to speak, a prescription on how to help students reach the benchmark.
Thank you, Blanca. Thank you. And that is a good segue into what is coming up. And so we're in a particular time of the TSI existence where it's about to change. They're making improvements to it. They're shifting slightly some things in the scoring area. So we don't want to miss this opportunity to put this recording out there with some information about the new test, what we kind of call the TSI-2 or the TSI 2.0. And so to do that, let me move on to the next slide here. There we go. So I think, Blanca, I think this is also yours. If you will walk us through what changes in the content of the test look like now.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So the previous slide gave us a very good example of the flow of the exam, what a student would actually see in one particular section. In this particular slide, you'll see what the previous or the current TSI is broken down to. And we went over those content areas. The previous slide showed you very clearly if, in fact, you did not reach the college ready benchmark, you moved on to one of two diagnostic components. The new TSI 2.0, which launches in January 11, 2021 to be exact, actually will change slightly, just a little bit. It will have quantitative reasoning added onto it. It is going to keep the algebraic reasoning, the geometric reasoning, and stats and probabilities. Those questions are slightly changing. One of the things that we're really happy to see is that the reading and the writing is going to be combined. So a student will see a set of questions, 24 questions, and may or may not be prompted for the essay. But these questions are broken down. The content areas, if you just compare them relatively on the screen here, they are distinctly different. The inferences for text is something that they've removed or maybe incorporated in another area. But the previous exam or the current exam was actually very heavy in that area. And for many students, it gave them problems. So I think that they've really addressed that. And I see that as a huge improvement for this particular exam. One of the other things that I mentioned just a moment ago that's really great about this particular exam is that at the end of those diagnostic components, if a student can reach a certain measure, they will have the opportunity to be classified as college ready. Those scores have been approved by the coordinating board and are in the process of getting published around the state. So I think really when you look at these two exams, they will continue to stay untimed, which is also good for students who have anxiety. But I think a lot of improvements. There are a lot of other things that are coming along with the exam, but I think that that's for future discussion, and I'm going to save that for any questions.
Okay. So the other change to the TSI 2.0, other than the content, is also the scoring. The scoring looks slightly different. The numbers change. Some of the benchmarks for being college ready changed. Julie, would you walk us through that?
Yeah, so we saw earlier the
All
original
right.
TSI was in a score range of 310 to 390. That's changing now. So the lowest score will be a 910 and then up to a 990. The really great thing that we're all excited about with this is if a student takes this exam, they score a 950, they'll be classified as college ready. If they go into that diagnostic test and they do well on the diagnostic, so in the math, they have a diagnostic score of 6 plus, they'll also be classified as college ready. Same with the ELAR. If they go into that diagnostic and they get a diagnostic score of I think it's a 5 or a 6, they're going to be classified as college ready. So it's kind of a second chance for students. And it's not going to be a one way ticket. They're either going to be college ready or not. It's going to give them another pathway to be able to go in and kind of have another chance to show the information and the knowledge they have and possibly come out on the other side as college ready. So again, this is going to be on the new TSI 2.0 that launches in January, January 11th to 2021. So we're really excited about this new test that's going to happen.
Yeah, and again, the students will still be able to get a diagnostic score, which allows them to really target areas of growth. And what to my colleague's point, what is really a little bit game changing is that students will no longer have to sit through the diagnostic and just get the report. Is they could sit through the diagnostic score and actually become college ready by getting a 6 or above on the diagnostic, and then they still get their areas for growth, but they've kind of met the benchmark for the test itself and for avoiding remedials and being able to take dual credit, as we've been talking about. Before we move on from the TSI 2.0, are there any questions from parents in the room?
There was a question in the chat. It said, is TSI only accepted in Texas universities? And the response was, yes, the TSI is a Texas assessment. Also, Jillian put a comment stating that students can also use SAT and ACT to prove college readiness if they will not use TSI. So with that point about the TSI being a Texas state assessment, other states use other exams such as the SAT and the ACT to determine college readiness for their universities.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you. Jillian, would you want to expand on that a little bit? Because I know we didn't cover that directly, but there is sort of my question would be, can I get away with not taking the TSI and still not take remedials, not maybe I'm not interested in dual credit, and I think that your point about SAT and ACT are also you can prove college readiness for the purposes of college enrollment. I think that's where you're getting at. You want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so if a student will not be submitting TSI, they have to prove their college readiness in some fashion, right? We have to have a measurement for our purposes. So a student can alternatively have an exemption from TSI through their SAT and or ACT score, and those scores will vary. Their card scores will vary from institution to institution. So I always advise students to check directly with the institution they are interested in to see exactly what that college or university requires for SAT and or ACT to grant the exemption from TSI. You have to have one or the other. You have to have TSI or the exemption to prove college readiness. with any institution you're planning on attending. And if those pathways prove challenging, that's when the TSI is necessary, right? To examine exactly where that student is at, and that is the most common measurement tool we use to measure where a student is at. And I know, for example, at UTSA, if a student is accepted into the university, right, but is not necessarily hasn't been admitted to the College of Engineering or the College, construction science or wherever have you, we may instruct the student to take a placement exam, whether it be the TSI or one designed by the college itself to prove readiness in certain areas that the college has deemed necessary for admittance into that college. And that is confusing for a lot of parents and students. They assume, well, I was accepted to UTSA, so I'm going to be an engineering major. Well, it's not exactly how it works. You have to be accepted as a freshman to the university or the college of your choice, and then also be accepted into the college inside of that university that houses that degree pathway, and that can be kind of confusing for students. So it all depends on where you enter, right? And what qualifying scores you have, which grants you admissibility into the program of your choice.
Thank you, Jillian. Thank you. Yeah, and the broader point is, that's why we think it's important for parents to know about the TSI because it is the foundational test for all things college readiness. The SAT and ACT play a role, and to your question earlier, Lucia, about TSI is really a very Texas-specific thing. Universities elsewhere will still ask for an equivalent college readiness test, and so it's not like kids can just get away with not taking it. And with the exception of the colleges that maybe don't ask for the SAT or ACT, which are very few compared to all the colleges that do, but there are some out there. But the bigger point I think to this is also that the TSI gives you access to college before you get to college. So that's to dual credit, to PTech, to CTE pathways, all of these career and technical kind of pathways that allow students to take college level courses in high school. And the great thing about that is more often than not, the district will cover that for students. In the case of us, we cover that for kids when they take dual credit or CTE or PTech. Any more questions around this topic of the new test and scoring, and how does that play with college admissions and dual credit courses?
I did just want to reiterate that for all Texas public institutions, the TSI is the same score. So that should be easier for parents to understand whether I'm going to Texas Tech or UT or a UTEP. The college ready score that you see advertised is the score that your student should be reaching for, the goal, so to speak, that we'd like every student to reach.
I had a quick question. I wanted to know, is SSD, are y'all going to start testing students now, or are y'all going to wait till the new test comes in effect in January?
So I'll let Ashley kind of coming here, but I think the broad question is like that's ongoing. So we are really testing 12th graders now for the current TSI. That leaves us a little bit of room to breathe for the 9th through 11th graders to do so, but we do have some 9th and 11th graders that need a test now because of some of the PTech career and technical pathways. Is that a good fair assessment, Ashley?
Yes, and then another thing to add to that, Dr. Society, is the fact that the new test with the English and or the reading and writing will be combined. And so some students have on the old test already met requirements for, let's just say, the writing and essay. Well, we're still continuing to test on that old version because if we can get students to meet the mark on reading, then they will not have to retest that portion of the new TSI. They will only have to retest math. So a short answer, yes, we are at campuses testing students on the old TSI and will continue to do so up until the change comes in January.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so again, to reiterate, there's a new test coming. As a district, we're learning it, we're dissecting it, we're understanding it, so we can help students make sure they can conquer it. And that doesn't mean that we have stopped testing or waiting for it. We're really doing what we can with what we have, which is the current TSI test. To Ashlyn's point, some of our kids are ready in one section, but maybe not in another. So we're really trying to navigate that complexity. And again, parents need to understand we make sure that kids test and then they prepare before they test again. So if your student tells you a story about a particular day where maybe they tested twice and didn't have any prep in between, or tested twice within a matter of a week and didn't have prep in between, know that our intent is to make sure they are prepared. And so that's something you can advocate for and say, I really want my kid, now that I know what the test does, can we help get him the diagnostic data so we know what to tackle? So this is why these are so important to us to have this avenue to talk to you. So the last piece of what we'll talk about today is what can you do as a parent? We understand that not all of us are experts on the TSI. Not all of us are English and math teachers. I'm not an English or math teacher or an expert on TSI. So what can I do? What can I do as a parent to be able to help my student prepare for it? And one of the biggest pieces of advice that I would give you is to just set the time aside. You may not necessarily know what exactly they might be studying, but that's when you can connect with your English and math teachers and school principals to say, I want to make sure my students study for 30 minutes 3 times a week. What can you give me for him to practice? I want to make sure my student takes 2 hours on a Saturday. What material can I get from you so that I have practice problems so that they can do this? If you also Google TSI practice test, there's a lot of free resources online, that you can take and print or put in your computer if you have one, put it on your internet devices if that's available, and have the students practice through there. There are websites that try to mirror the computer aspect of the test, where you can take the test as if you were taking it on the computer. You can also have PDFs that you can print, pieces of paper with practice questions on them. And so those are things you could do, but I think the most essential thing that I would advocate is that you really think about, where am I setting aside the time for them to do this outside of class, so that I can ensure that they're on the path to get a good score, so that at least I'm giving them the time to do this. The second thing is, ask your high school for your student's TSI score, both the actual score and then the diagnostic score, because schools should be knowing what those are, because again, the diagnostics helps us determine how to prep the student for the next time they take it. And now you have the numbers, right? You can come back to this recording and see, do they have a 350 on the actual one? Do they have a 950 when the new one comes out? How far away are they from that 950 or that 350? And that helps with how much time I may need to set aside for my student to study. And then lastly, reward those behaviors. So reward the behavior that they are studying, that they're meeting, that they are spending 30 minutes 3 times a week, or 2 times a week, or 2 hours on a Saturday. And then reward the behavior of meeting TSI readiness, because it really does expand the opportunities that are available in high school and after high school, by just meeting the readiness. So you know what they like, you know what they don't like, so you can incentivize and basically reward those behaviors by telling them, if you spend the time, then we'll be able to do X, Y, and Z, or you'll be able to get X, Y, and Z. What you're able to offer, you know what your students like and what you are able to give them. But really setting the time aside, you yourself as a parent asking the school for your TSI score, so you can know where your student is in their performance, and then telling them, we think we can reward your behavior if we give you something, if we allow you to do something just by studying for the test. And then if you meet readiness, incentivizing that as well. To my group of people here, anything else, any other kinds of pieces of advice you would give parents around prepping?
I just had some quick advice. For students that are taking the TSI, I know a lot of them are scared to take it, but what's good about the test is that it's not timed. So I always tell the students, make sure you take your time during when you're taking that test. So a lot of our students, I know they take 3, 4, 5 hours. It's all dependent on the student. So just make sure they take their time.
That is a great point. For high school, we tend to have enough time to do that. Sometimes when students take it in college, like well, this may not be as true now in the pandemic, but when they go to physically take it at the sites have to close at some point. It doesn't mean that the student is done with the test. It just means that it's 9 o'clock at night and we really can't be here anymore. So that's important to note because sometimes students may be deterred from taking it because they were told that the test center closes. Well, it needs to close because people need to go sleep. But it doesn't mean you can't come back and finish. You can't come back and try to do it later, or the colleges themselves might schedule out gaps of time to do that. So I think that's an important just public service announcement is that it's not the fact that a test center closes that you are done with the test. It's that they need to close. Blank, I
One
saw you
piece
on
of
mute. I don't know if you
advice
want. Oh,
I'd
go ahead.
share. I have one piece of advice I'd share with parents when trying to support their students, not only in overcoming the TSI, but just in general college readiness. I find that lots of students, the mundane act of studying and the routine of that can become challenging. So if a parent can enroll students in enrichment activities, summer programming that invariantly teaches the skills needed to pass the DSI, but in a structure and a format that creates social interaction, problem-based learning, community learning, that is very valuable. Programs like you say has prep freshman engineering program, if they get involved in ETS, educational talent search, or Upward Bound, or attend program at Cafe College, all those activities in and of themselves will help prepare the student for TSI because they're learning the skills they need to be college ready in a very interactive and enriching environment that makes it also fun. So that's an important thing to take into account too when trying to help your student become college ready.
Thank you, Julian.
I think the only thing I wanted to say was that, up to your point, was that students have 13 calendar days to finish the exam. We try to reschedule them when they come in, and as you say, we have to close. We can't continue anymore today, but we really do try to finish that. And now there's a new feature on the exam. I'm not sure that everyone's aware of it unless you actually administer the exam, but unless you finish that exam, that score report will no longer be available. So we really follow up with students to have them come back and finish in the 13 days. So, it is important for the student to finish, but they do have the exam does not close right there. We have the ability to go back and open the exam. It will resume the student at a similar question. So if you were in the math section on question number 22, it will not give you the exact question, but it will bring you to a like question.
And I just kind of wanted to answer from the high school perspective. If you have a young high schooler, maybe ninth grade, I would encourage parents to begin having conversations around TSI. Maybe your student is not familiar with TSI yet. And that could be an activity that you and your young high schooler could do together. Maybe just a time on the weekend for you guys to sit down and Google TSI or begin to search some of the different activities or even why it's important. But exposure will help to eliminate some of the anxiety and fear that younger students may have in taking the TSI. So I would just encourage those conversations at home. They'll hear it at school, but of course, parents and the home life makes a huge impact on a student's success. So hearing it at home will help them not be afraid of the assessment as well as look forward to being successful on that assessment.
So we have about 3 more minutes. So parents, this is an opportunity. If you'd like to unmute yourself, ask some last minute questions, place it in the chat. We're going to invite you to do that because this is a wealth of resources for you. Okay. So we've come to the end of the workshop. Y'all had great questions. It was amazing. And I hope this workshop was very helpful to you parents. I want to thank Ms. Lucia and Ms. Rivera for joining us. And I also want to thank Dr. Cesati, Ms. Nino, Ms. Padilla, Ms. Barrientes, Ms. Willard, and Ms. Williams for joining us and sharing your expertise with us. We thoroughly appreciate it. With